Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this webinar on understanding and implementing inclusive PE equipment solutions. My name is Cecilia Cruse. I'm the occupational therapist and subject matter expert on staff for our Special Needs Division habilitations. And I'd like to introduce my counterpart, Terry Gardner. She is one of our elite PE trainers with school specialty. Terry, hello.
Hello. Hi, everyone. We're so thrilled that you've decided to spend an hour of your precious time learning about and implementing inclusive PE equipment solutions. Just a short thing about my background. I have taught for over 36 years, and during that short teaching career, I was able to teach self-contained adaptive physical education as well as general physical education classes with mainstream students. And that was for over 30 years. So I love what I do. I love to be able to share with you as a member of a team at School Specialty. And I will let Cecilia begin with the next slide.
Thanks, Terry. And we're going to review our learning objectives. As you can see, Terry brings a wealth of experience into this webinar, so thrilled that she could join me today. We're going to look at three main objectives that we want to identify at least three solutions from the equipment starter pack and identify the rationale for use. We're looking at three modifications to use with an activity lesson. And then at the end, I want you to be familiar with where you can find additional solutions and ideas from both our PE catalog sport time and our habilitations catalog for special needs. So who is this webinar for? Can be great for just our gen ed physical education educators, for adapted PE teachers, special education teachers, occupational and physical therapists, and anybody else who has an interest, after school camps, anybody who's got an interest in working with inclusive practices. So welcome to all. And Terry's going to just talk briefly because we've updated our inclusive PE guidebook recently.
We'd like to introduce the second edition of the Inclusive PE Guidebook, and I was fortunate to be a part of the team that completed this revision. And the big change, there's just so many great things in this guidebook, but the big change is a focus on inclusion for all students. So we talk about a lot of different groups of students that might not feel included in our physical education programs. And of course, we still go through the disability categories and give specific strategies and tips for each of those. But this is an all-inclusive pre-K through 12th grade inclusive PE guidebook, and it would be a great resource for any physical education teacher, from beginning teachers to some of us veteran teachers that need maybe some reminders sometimes about tips and strategies when working with all students.
So it was designed looking at the eligibility categories under IDEIA. There is a website there if you're interested in the specific ones, or you can also look at the tabs in the guidebook itself to, because we'll be looking at each of the pieces of equipment and then just kind of identifying what types of students with disabilities it might be helpful for. So all that is in the tabs, and or you can find it on the ed.gov site as well. So let's get rolling. So the first one in the kit is the 6-inch success balls. This has been a mainstay with our sport time PE line for many, many years. They are soft, sort of foam pellet filled throw and catch balls, and they're just great for students that have some decreased strength or their eye-hand coordination isn't very good. If they have issues with fragility, like children with spina bifida or osteogenesis imperfecta, for example, we call those under the OI, orthopedically impaired disability or eligibility section of IDEIA. Kids that have issues with what we call modulation, that is, they throw too hard, and so are, taking out their neighbor with a target when they go to play catch. So that these can really be nice for all those types of kids, as well as our kids with autism, and as we talked about, our kids with EBD or emotional behavior disorder. Those children as well often have those modulation issues where they kind of need to calm down. So other diagnoses, I'm just going through these so you know kind of the lingo. CP for cerebral palsy, JRA, juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, MD for muscular dystrophy. So Terry, any other comments on these? We both
Um,
love them.
Yeah, just I wouldn't have a class without these because they create an opportunity for success for all students. And if you have a student, like Cecilia said, with CP that maybe has limited grasp, even if they just have a pinch, they can use these success balls. And the big thing I see in the classroom, a lot of our students may have a fear of catching, and there's no fear with the success balls. They're just so light, and it takes away that fear, so students then are more successful and willing to try to catch. So they're just awesome.
Yep, I agree. Whoop. Let's go. There we go. Next up, the catch tail foam balls. So this is an 8-inch ball with a 3-foot tail, so it's pretty lengthy. So it's really great for slowing down speed, so it can help kids that have issues with visual tracking or following a trajectory. So our children with visual impairments, maybe that are just low vision, maybe could go ahead and spot and track this. Our kids with CP, kids with more intellectual disabilities, so severe and profound cognitive issues, and that would hold well as true as well for kids with TBI, so traumatic brain injury. Anything that where we've got the cognitive skills and or the visual skills that need a little bit of extra help.
In addition to this, they're just plain fun to use. The kids love them, so that's a big deal. That increases motivation. They are easier to catch because you have that lengthy tail where you might be able to grab a hold of the tail. They're visually appealing, so the students enjoy working with them, and I love to use them with target work or individual or partner throwing and catching.
Perfect. The slow-mo bump balls, also a mainstay in our line, had it for many, many years. So this provides some extra tactile input, touch input. You can use it as a replacement for simple ball activities. Again, because of the colors, some of our students with visual impairment on the autism spectrum, that have sensory processing disorders. So our children that maybe need a little extra tactile or touch input. So ADHD, kids with severe and profound intellectual disabilities, all of those. It's almost universal. And there is many more sizes and colors. And I know, Terry, you got some comments on these as well.
Yes, just I agree with everything Cecilia said. I had that in my notes also to be sure and mention. But let me tell you something about your older students because sometimes we forget about those high school students and how to include them. The older students, you can actually use these balls for reaction time work with rolling, bouncing, working against the wall, and I just wanted to add that to what Cecilia said.
Ooh, next up, the Yucky Ball. Also a very tactile fidget that could be used for calming. So if you have a child that perhaps is working on turn taking and needs a little patience and needs something tactile, it works great as a fidget, but it can also be used in place of ball toss activities. So our students with attention deficit, autism, emotional behavior disorder, any kid with sensory processing issues, this is a good one as well.
Yes, you just gotta love the name of it, if nothing else. A yucky ball. The students like the yucky ball. I use it in relay teamwork, and it's a fun, if I give them a choice, they choose this ball. As Cecilia said, it's heavy, so it's good for students that need that weighted implement for calming. I had one student that with the larger yucky ball, he liked to set it on his head and feel that weight. So it's just a great option for your students.
And on we go. This is one of my personal favorites, the finger light balls. We've included the 14-inch side with the kit, but they also are available in 10-inch and 16-inch. The beauty of these is they can be used in place of a beach ball because it is kind of a cross between a balloon float time and a beach ball float time. So just gives that little extra. So again, for children that have visual tracking issues. So pretty much a similar diagnosis as we've discussed before. Hopefully you're starting to get familiar with those acronyms: spina bifida, severe and profound intellectual disabilities, orthopedically impaired, once again, for those children with osteofragility issues, like a student that has arthrogryposis, limited movement, range of motion, limited movement, very fragile. These are great tools for them. It'll literally bounce off any body part. So I like this as part of occupational therapy skills for when I have kids that are using wheelchairs and or don't have a lot of active range of motion with their body.
Absolutely. And one of the great benefits of this product, it's latex free. And if you have a student with latex allergies, you know that all of your materials need to be latex free. And we had wanted this for a long time as physical education teachers, and now we have it, and I love them. And the other thing I would say about this, I use them with all students as a lead up skill for striking with hand activities like volleyball skills. Um, and like Cecilia said, they react somewhere between a balloon and a beach ball, but they are so much more durable than my beach balls. If you're a physical education teacher like me, you replace beach balls every couple months. They just beach balls don't last, and these are just so much more durable.
Great. The bell ball. uh, two sizes. So the 9.5-inch comes actually with the starter pack. So again, just as it kind of says, it's got some built-in auditory input in there for our kids with visual issues, traumatic brain issue, or some intellectual disabilities.
And it's a great ball for kicking skills, throwing, catching, rolling, the auditory input for students, like Cecilia said. Um, and then also, it's one of the better colors for our students with any type of visual impairment. So the bright yellow is well seen by those students, or can be seen by those students sometimes.
Next up, similar color is this yellow foam volleyball. And again, the high visibility for visual tracking. Students with visual impairments, intellectual disability, attention deficit. And I know, Terry, you've got some comments on how this particular, the foam and the lightness of it, right, is helpful.
Yes, it's great for all students because when you're teaching those introductory skills, the regular volleyballs are sometimes painful to work with, and this one is soft and light. It's an attractive color, and you don't have the fear of using correct form for the skill. because it's not going to be, it's not going to be painful at all. So those students don't have fear, so they're more willing to engage and execute that good form. Um,
Yeah,
it's just a great,
you're giving me some flashbacks about growing up in Wisconsin where it was cold and you were outside, right? And you're hitting those cold, yeah, and those
yeah,
the
paintball
original volleyballs. So this is much kinder on the hands, is what you're saying, and the
and the
fists or the
arms. Yeah.
wrists. Yeah. Hmm.
hmm And it's a I use it for a lot of different activities. It's a multi-purpose ball. So even if you want to do some outdoor activities like volley tennis, which is a combination of volleyball and tennis rules on the tennis court, this ball works outdoors too. So it's just a very usable piece of equipment.
And on to also a nice one for all over skills, the all ball, literally. So again, very high tactile surface, so easy hold and catch. And then kids with autism are, I think, because of the sensory needs of those kids, that's going to be particularly appealing. Our students with orthopedic impairments and those with intellectual disabilities. So it comes in the kit actually with the set of 6.
And I like the variety of colors. You can use it once again as a multi-purpose ball for all students. The surface of these, if you haven't had a chance to get a hand on these, is a little bit different. It's really easy to hold on to and catch. It's almost, help me, Cecilia, it's not sticky, but it has an easy grip surface. And
Yeah,
I just really like the feel of it. Some of my students that have difficulty grasping or hanging onto the ball, that surface allows them to be successful.
yes, and once again, all latex-free products. So even though it does have that tactile or sort of rubbery, not rubbery, but that sort of tactile input, these are latex-free. The visualizer. Now we're looking at so some of our kids that might have hearing impairment because it's going to have some mini balls that'll produce both visual and auditory input. So both our kids with visual or hearing impairments, this might be useful for. And I like the size of it. So in OT we call it BMC skills, bilateral motor coordination. So catching, throwing, we've got to really get both sides of the body engaged on that one.
I agree. The oversize is good for so many of our students. Um, I have on in my notes about this piece of equipment, catching, throwing, rolling activities. It's visually appealing. And once again, when I like to give student choice in equipment. And when I offer this as a choice to my students, it's one of the first ones chosen. So it's just a fun piece of equipment to use. And we know all the benefits as far as the visual and the auditory feedback. But if students like it and they're attracted to it, then you increase student engagement.
That's the bottom line. It's going to get used. And as Terry said at the beginning, so many of these, we really call these, universal design for learning. They may be helpful for our kids with special needs, but all kids are these products are appealing to all. The giant volleyball, so oversized fun. This is a 40-inch one that can do supporting teamwork activities. Students in wheelchairs might even be able to access it. And Terry, I'm going to let you roll with this one because I know you've got some activities with this.
I wanted to talk about this in addition to the second edition guidebook. The second edition guidebook really supports the social and emotional learning competencies, and equipment like this, where we can do team building activities or even if we're working to move a large piece of equipment from one place to another, and there's specific guidelines about the entire team being engaged, those are the type of activities that support that social and emotional learning environment. And even our students with wheelchairs, they're able to push or tap or kick and be totally engaged with these giant pieces of equipment. The other piece that's really fun about these, they look like a soccer ball, don't they? They look like a volleyball. So it's like the real deal in a super size, and the students just love working with these.
We had them recently at a conference and they get a lot of play and a lot of
The
attention. They're
adult.
just, yep, they're fun. All right, the handball pack. So it's a set of 11 and there's a series of sure catch balls. So porcupine, you name the sensory texture, grab balls, gripper balls, they're all in there. So that way you have on hand, depending on what your student needs, especially those, again, we're looking at those with orthopedic impairment, maybe a student with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis that has very limited range of motion, or maybe a child with CP that can, hook a wrist or a finger or something. So those with low grip strength, low range of motion, this is going to be ideal, and this gives you options.
Um, just to complement what Cecilia said, I love this pack because you have such a variety of different implements that you can offer your students, because we all know through trial and error with our students that sometimes what works well with one may or may not work well or engage another. So I love that they put all these together and that you have that variety of choices. And I'm going to talk about just a little bit about the grab ball because I use this a ton in my classes with students. And one of the things that I do later on in the slide, you will see an exercise band, and I use that with the grab balls. I just wanted to talk about this because sometimes I need to have a suspended activity for some of my students. So I will loop that exercise band through the grab ball and suspend it so my students can work independently. I really like for my students to be as independent as possible, and they can work on individual striking or kicking skills with that grab ball. It's not only can I loop through it and suspend it, but it's easy to grab, thus the name, because of the holes throughout the ball, and it's very light too. So I just wanted to mention those things.
And also, so as an OT, I'm trying to make it sometimes more tactile. So I'm stuffing some of those other balls inside of there. And then you get sort of a
Mm.
sensory ball inside as well. So lots of options with this handball pack. So including the fleece pom-pom, which is one that I put inside the grab ball as we just discussed. So there's two included in the kit. So these are very lightweight. They're just as they look. They're foam, they're fleece, has a small bell. So you've got some nice sound input there for localizing and tracking. And these make nice replacements for beanbag toss games. So again, typically our students with orthopedic impairments, this is going to be especially helpful for.
Yes, and these are once again great for individual work, students working independently, or with partners. The fleece bell ball, when I've had that at conference shows or I've used that in the classroom, the visual and the feel of that is just different than any other ball that we have. It's light, but it's super soft and cuddly. And it also has a place where a student can put their hand or their fist inside of it. So they can actually, if they can't grab it, they can put their arm and their hand inside of it and move it around that way. So it's a fun ball to use also.
Yeah, and I would just comment that the pom-poms are in the pack as well. I just put them both together here. Like the success balls that we talked about at the beginning, the pom-poms just make a nice toss game as well that are so lightweight. So same issues as a success ball that we can use these. The Mega Bat. So it comes with the set of 6. These are super lightweight. So if strength is limited, then these are going to be helpful. And I think for good, motor planning skills for kids that aren't going to be able to handle a regular baseball bat.
Absolutely. So the larger striking surface, students are more successful. They're fun colors. They're great for hitting off of a tee if your students are working on striking skills. Just just fun to use with all students as a lead up to a regular bat or regular piece of regular implement.
The foam flyers, so a little bit softer than maybe the traditional sort of frisbee that you might be used to. So um, throwing and catching skills and younger students, again, those with autism particular because of the tactile input of this and the lightweight issues. Sensory processing challenges, our students with emotional behavior disorders that maybe have some fear factors, or again, those modulation issues of throwing too hard, that this is a good one for those kinds of kids.
Yeah, these are great to use when playing any kind of disc game like Ultimate Disc or versions of Can Jam, or when you're throwing through. You'll see I like to use upright targets with my students if you're throwing through an upright target. And once again, and we've mentioned this with the some of the other equipment, there's no fear in trying to learn to catch and throw these as a disc. If you've played disc games with a hard plastic disc and you catch it wrong and you jam a finger, then it's difficult to get those students to engage in that activity again. I use these soft disc with high school students. They love them. So it creates an opportunity for higher engagement, and then when your students are more engaged, we increase the MVPA, the moderate to vigorous physical activity, and that's our goal, is to get all of our students really active, engaged, and moving.
Juggling scarves, also an oldie but a goodie. So you get the full set of 12, so nice and slow for working on eye-hand coordination, those kids with issues with grip and finger strength, and need maybe a little bit of extra visual cue and float time. So I just couldn't even, I think all kids should be exposed to these.
Absolutely. And I teach juggling with all of my students. So they're great for teaching actual juggling, but scarves can be used for just a multitude of activities. We do a lot of individual throwing, catching, reaction time work with scarves, partner activities where you throw and switch. There's just all kinds of possibilities. And the set is um, all different colors, so it's fun visually, and my students just love it.
Oh, one of my favorites again, the rainbow ones. So these have sound with them, a little bit of as you move them around, so rhythm activities. And for me, so as an OT, I'm using this with my severe and profound uh, students, that it really has really basic cause and effect. So they can see it, they can hear it, and it's something that's just very, very easy to hold and work.
And Cecilia talked about where she uses these, and I use them with all students because in the physical education classroom, these are so much fun. So if you're doing a creative movement activity, dance, any kind of rhythm activity, the students just they love to make the wands move, and And once again, and you're going to get tired of hearing me say this, but it increases student engagement. They like that piece of equipment. They've got the sound as well as the visual input from using these, and it's just I love to use it with creative movement. It just adds to what we're doing.
Oh, I think you mentioned this earlier in terms of, so the can-do tube, this one actually comes with handles, and we put the extra large in the kit. So it can be used for exercise, for resistive exercises. Certainly as a fidget around a chair. I'm talking from my OT experience now that sometimes we use these as a foot fidget in the classroom. So, and then a transition tool for deep touch pressure. So maybe the child needs to hold it and do the co-contraction, sort of the back and forth stretch and release that the material will provide for that. So again, a lot of our kids with sensory issues, so that includes those with autism, behavior disorders, ADHD, and even our kids with learning disabilities that sometimes have those sensory processing issues that go along with that. So, oh, extra light, my apologies, not long. So extra light to extra heavy. So that's the amount of torque that you're going to get off the band based on, and we put the yellow one, which is a very light or easy one. So for children with decreased strength, this is going to be an easier one for them to use.
Absolutely. And I love that you guys get the different perspectives because Cecilia and I are coming from different positions in the work that we do. But I love hearing what she does. It gives me ideas for how to better use the equipment. And I'm just glad that you get the viewpoint from both of us. And I already talked about this one, how I use it for suspended activities. I also might use it if I have a student that has a buddy or a partner in the class. I may have them both hang on to that as we're doing an activity just to keep them focused and together. But there's the obvious, the strength, the fidget, the things that Cecilia talked about, but then maybe, something like what I do with suspended activities, working on striking skills with the hands and the feet.
It's got a lot of versatility. Oh, and the jingle bracelets. So just straight auditory input that can be strapped around a wrist or an ankle to encourage awareness or movement. So for, again, some of the kids I work with, those with cerebral palsy or a traumatic brain injury, where we sometimes get what's called unilateral neglect. That is, if they have a hemiparesis or one side of the body isn't working well, they tend to forget about that side. So this gives them that visual and auditory cue to incorporate that back in.
And we talked about the grab ball earlier. I will weave these sometimes through the grab ball and hook them together. They have Velcro connections, so you can use more than one together. And I will use those as that auditory input for students. And sometimes I will put them on the partner and have them use those as an auditory input for their partner. Um, just a great tool to have in your classes. Love them.
Nice. Yep. What kit could be complete without including arrows and spot markers? So need we say more? As an OT, I love these to help those kids that have poor proprioceptive registration. So they're all over the place. We can give them a little bit of a spatial boundary definition using these. So first and then kinds of activities for sequencing with visual cues. So all kinds of options. Terry, what do you
Yeah,
have? I love
I,
these.
I can't live without these. So I love using the arrows for the visual cues. I love using spot markers for a home base for some of my students that need a home base. Um, I use them all the time, and I think they're pretty self-explanatory. But if you haven't used them, you really should because they make life so much easier.
Absolutely. So other sensory strategies, just my kind of 2 cents as an OT to help prevent meltdowns, because physical education classes can be busy, they're often hectic, they sometimes can be in areas where acoustics are difficult. So just a couple of ideas that we can do to help bring those in. We want to look at noise reduction headphones so that to sort of buffer some of that auditory figure ground, we call that, especially if you're working in a gymnasium. So these are different options with noise reduction ratings for kids. High school kids, I like the one called Vibes. That's the little earbuds on the bottom left. So low profile, and they will help with some of the reducing some of that sound input for those kids on the autism spectrum that are very, very sound sensitive, have sensory processing issues, are emotional behavior kids. These are all nice strategies for them. So visual cues, we've already talked about this with the spot markers and the direction arrows. First, then becomes very important for these kids, understanding, visually seeing what they need, what needs to happen in their sequence of events. Um, Timers, if you don't already have one, I'm a big fan of what's called a time timer. That's the bottom right. So visually, you see the red disappears as time goes by. It runs off a AA battery. Super easy to implement. It gives kids a visual cue. And then social stories, we call them. Speech pathologists use these a lot, where we're literally taking a child, sort of creating a story, and you can do these through a company online called Sandbox Learning and take them through. You could write sort of a story about what's going to happen during their physical education activities, or my day at school. We've got things riding the bus. So there's many, many options of strategies. For spatial boundary definition, as we discussed earlier with the spot markers, we have so many kids that literally don't know where their bodies are in space. So these are ways to help with that. The body socks is a great one you're probably familiar with. That's a Lycra sock that the kids kind of crawl into. And as they push out, it pushes back in and gives them that deep touch pressure through the muscles and joints. We just added the floor marks. Love those. So literally it's paint. You can put it right on the floor and it wipes right up, either with the mark. You can buy wipes that are included, or just use any kind of really a wet wipe will work. So vinyl tape, all those cues have been around for a long time, but they're very, very helpful for kids that have these spatial boundary issues. Deep touch pressure, we've talked about already with the yucky balls, but adding other options. We've got a weighted sports ball set. So literally the kids are carrying something heavy, which helps calm the body down because it's zapping that proprioceptive sense to really help with organization and calming. So, and I would give these kids the heavy work chores, like they got to push or pull the cart, because they need those work chores to be able to get that self-regulation. And on to Terry's favorite things.
Well, I have more favorite things than I can put on one slide, but Cecilia said I could only have this many. So, um, just the first thing, everybody has hoops and everybody needs hoops, but you can use them for a multitude of activities. I love to use hoops as upright targets. So you've got some hoop holders, some different type of hoop connectors on this little sheet. And, look, the one picture has they've done a team activity where they've created their world, right? And they're inside of it. So just all kinds of things that you can do, creative activities with hoops and hoop holders. I love the upright targets for all of my students, especially with my students that use a wheelchair or some kind of assistive device. Those upright targets are just, it makes everything easier, more, they're able to be successful in the activity. On the bottom left, you'll see the kayak paddles, and those are indoor kayak paddles. I teach outdoor adventure with all my students, even in my adapted PE class. That's a separate class. I always do outdoor adventure activities, and I teach kayaking first on scooters. I use the mega scooters because they're larger and I can put just about anyone on those mega scooters. But those paddles are fun for teaching kayaking before I take them to an actual pool or a pond and put them in the water. I teach all those skills prior to that. Cones, everybody needs those. I love using the cones with obstacle courses. Um, and you can use those with the scooters. I try to color coordinate some of my activities, and that helps some of my students visually. Parachutes, oh gosh, if you're doing the large teamwork with the big parachutes, or there's small parachutes that you can do partner work, love to do that. And the big bop tee, I like this tee because any size of ball fits on this tee, so I can use the oversized equipment as well as the smaller equipment. It's just a fun new tea that I've been using this last year. And then the other thing that's not on here, and I know you guys will agree with me, pool noodles. I use them for everything. So you can use them for striking, defending. They're they're lightweight, easy to grasp. And I should have put a pool noodle picture on there, but Cecilia cut me off.
I know, my bad. And I like them because you can make adapted handles out of them as well. So, yes, pool noodles should go in your favorite things basket as well. I agree. All right, so this is how to contact us. If you have any additional questions, email is on there. And again, we thank you for joining us. I hope that this has been helpful, and we look forward to hearing from you with questions or with comments. So thank you all so much for joining us today.
Yep, and thank you for what you do every day. We appreciate your work, and we know what it's like, and we just appreciate how you make a difference in the lives of our students.